Welcome, adventurers, to another community chat where we discuss the week's game development, recapping the most recent devlog, and occasionally we get into a little Web3 and gaming, since, we're building this project in those industries. So if you're listening to this on YouTube and you want to get in on the conversation yourself, so just come on, hang out with us. Make sure you follow our Twitter also for reminders about our events, a whole bunch of other awesome content related to the game development and lore. So with that all said, I'll hand you over to Tail and he can get into what he has planned for us this week.
So we'll mostly be talking about the way that we place items and the way that we handle the users interacting with those items. Even though it's a very small portion of the dungeon creator, it really is one of the most important things to handle, since if placing an asset annoys the player even a little bit, then the entire dungeon creator, like the entire game, becomes frustrating. But first, let's recap a little bit. The dungeon creator in Spire is a very powerful tool that allows players to create their own custom dungeons very easily. We're using Godot with a tile map system, which makes it very easy for players to select a layer or select a category and choose from a set of assets that can be placed on those tiles. During the creation of the dungeon, players can test it out at any time by playing through the dungeon and experiencing it firsthand. The end result is a dungeon creator that allows the players to create a very unique and maybe even challenging game content that can be shared not just with us, but also with other players, or even used in the main game if we create it ourselves. So on the bottom of the screen, you'll always have a various amount of tabs that split the game assets in separate categories. To make it easier for users to understand, we made sure that these exact categories are the actual different layers that you're selecting. So players will never have to worry about which layer they're on or which layer they have to place something. The assets that are presented to the player are automatically generated by the game engine based on the category that the player has selected. This means that the players don't have to spend time searching for the right assets to place on their dungeon tiles. Instead, the assets are presented to them in a very convenient way, allowing them to quickly generate the dungeon layout that they desire. In addition, the assets are fully functional out of the box, which means that they can be used immediately without any additional configuration or any additional coding. This makes it very easy for players to create their complex and engaging dungeon layouts, even if they don't have a lot of experience with game development or the game coding. So overall, this feature makes the dungeon creator a lot more user-friendly and accessible, which is very important for players who want to focus on the creative aspects of the game development. We're using an inventory system for assets that can be placed on the dungeon tiles to make it feel more in tune with the game itself. This allows players to easily view and select the assets that they want to use in their dungeon, making it a lot faster and a lot more efficient to create their desired layout. You'll also have like a Minecraft-like fast select bar where you can place your most used assets in. This makes that the inventory system is designed to be very user-friendly. Players can access their inventory by clicking on a button or on an icon on the screen, which will bring up a menu that displays all of the available assets. This inventory is very like the recent Zelda games, and it's the same exact inventory that we're also going to use in story mode. So wherever you go in the game, you'll always have the same UI coming back. The assets are typically categorized based on their type or function, such as like interactable objects, static objects, or the monsters. To select an asset from the inventory, players simply need to click on it and then they can drag it on the desired location on the dungeon tile map. But for floor and wall tiles, you simply select that asset and then you can hold your mouse button so you can slide through different tiles and place multiple in a row. And to make this even easier, we're using something that's called autotiling. So in 2D games, you have a bunch of tiles that make up the entire game environment. And autotiling is a technique that allows the game engine to basically automatically generate those new tiles to fill in the gaps between existing tiles. It's based on predefined rules and predefined algorithms. This way we can also replace existing tiles automatically if you place a tile next to it. So, for example, let's say you're creating a game with a grassy field environment. You might have a tile for the grass itself, a tile for the rock, a tile for the tree, and autotiling would allow the game engine to automatically place tiles in between to fill in the gaps between these tiles. We can also convert a existing straight wall into a corner because you placed a different wall on a 90 degrees next to it. This technique can save players a lot of time and a lot of effort, since you don't have to manually place every single individual tile in the game environment. Instead, the game places the correct tiles for you. So when you're creating a corner, you can just place 6 walls in a row and then 6 walls next to it, and it'll automatically create that corner in between. For this week, we've mostly been working on implementing the animations and sound for when players place or destroy assets in the dungeon creator. When players place an asset on the tile map, we want to create a little visual effect that shows the asset appearing on the tile and becoming a part of the dungeon environment. Similarly, when players destroy that asset, we also want to create a little visual effect that shows the asset being destroyed or disappearing from the tile. To achieve this, we've been using Godot's, luckily, built-in animation system that allows us to create very complex animations very easily. We've created several animation sequences that are triggered when players place or destroy assets. For various different assets, we'll have to use different animations. And when a player places a lever on the tile map, the animation will start by showing the lever very small, transparent, and it'll grow and gradually increase and become more opaque once it reaches its final size, for example. Or when you destroy an asset, the animation will start by showing the asset as a large visual object, but as the animation progresses, the asset will basically be destroyed into tons of little particle animations. An example is a indie game that's being made right now is Dig Dig Boom, that really has a smooth sound to it and a very fun animation, and that makes it even fun to place something down on the board, and we want to achieve the same feeling. Also, one of the features that we're planning to add in the dungeon creator is the ability for players to place stairs that allow characters to move up or down levels within the dungeon. This will add a completely new level of complexity and a completely new challenge to the dungeon creator, but also to the players, as players will need to consider the vertical layout of the dungeons as well, in addition to their horizontal layout. To implement this feature, we're planning to use a combination of the built-in navigation and the previously discussed A-star pathfinding. We'll also need a couple custom scripts and assets that we'll create specifically for this purpose. The basic idea is that when players place a stair, for example, it will be recognized by the game engine as a valid path for characters to traverse. Even though it's not a ground layer asset, you're still possible to go on top of these stairs. Players will then walk onto a different layer without having to endure an entire load screen, because we're not going to a actual different scene. We're still in the same game, we're just higher or lower. We're also planning to add additional features and mechanics that specifically designed to work with the vertical layout of the dungeon. We can allow players to place traps or other hazards on different levels on the dungeon. We can give characters the special ability that allow them to move up or down levels passerby, for example, teleporting, or we can have them attack on a level below them, for example. Most of all, it makes puzzles a lot more fun. So I've been playing a lot of We Were Here recently, which is a Dutch, I think it's Dutch. It's a Dutch, let's just say it's Dutch. It's a cooperative puzzle game that requires players to work together to solve a series of intricate puzzles and escape from a mysterious castle. The game is designed to be very challenging and immersive, with each puzzle building upon the previous one, and it requires two players to communicate very effectively and think outside of the box in order to progress. I was very inspired by the clever and intricate puzzles in We Were Here, and I wanted to incorporate similar events. I wanted to incorporate similar elements into the dungeon creator in our game. Even though it's multiplayer, as you know, we're planning to add multiplayer functionality to the game at some point in the future, but we've decided to focus on single-player gameplay for the initial release of the game. So before I talk a little bit about We Were Here, I'll first explain the reasons why we chose to go with single player first, because there are several reasons why we've decided to delay the implementation of multiplayer until after the game has launched. We want to ensure that the core single player experience is really as polished as possible, without sacrificing any resources or attention to the multiplayer aspect of the game. By focusing on single-player game for the initial release, we can really ensure that the game is as fun and balanced as possible for the players who also prefer to play solo. Second, we want to take the time to really design and implement multiplayer functionality in a way that is both effective and enjoyable for our players. Because multiplayer gameplay requires a completely different set of design and considerations and mechanics. And we want to ensure that we take the time to get it right before launching it to the public. We believe that adding multiplayer functionality after the game is launched will really allow us to receive more valuable feedback and input from our players. And this will help us to really refine and improve the multiplayer aspect of our game, based on the actual experiences and preferences of our existing player base. To achieve the inspirations that we had from We Were Here, we are planning in the future to create a variety of puzzles and challenges that will require players to think really creatively and work together in order to progress the dungeon. These puzzles may involve solving riddles, deciphering codes, or manipulating the environment around you in various ways. And this also means that we can have a little dungeon creator or dungeon destroyer within the game itself. We're also planning to incorporate elements of exploration and discovery in the dungeon creator, allowing players to uncover hidden secrets and uncover the history and lore of the game world. So the fun thing about We Were Here is that players start at opposite sides of the level or opposite sides of the wall. So they can't really see each other and they are really forced to communicate to find their way to the end. So creating upstairs for us, so to say, adds greatly to this idea. Since you can have one player be upstairs and the other player be downstairs and eventually to find each other on the same level. So with everything that we've been working on for the past few weeks and everything that we're trying to put in the dungeon creator, we really have to think about what's next before we make the previous thing. We really aspire in creating a dungeon creator where you can make such intriguing levels and that level of communication that We Were Here has as well. But as I keep rambling on, I think that's actually it for this week. Has been a lot to think about and a lot to configure for such a eventually small thing, but you really have to think about what you want to create in the future before you create what's now, because otherwise you just keep having to refactor old code and you keep having to go back and add new features in already existing code. And personally, I'd rather work a little bit longer on the beginning and work a little bit longer on the idea of the game that we're creating than having to go back and create this spaghetti of a code, you know?
Thanks, Tail, for your awesome update. It's great to hear how much progress you've made towards getting such a customizable and smooth experience for all of us ready to play. Especially that stairs element, that's going to be it's going to just lead to such an incredible range of attacks and options for us. So that one little breakthrough opened up so many new levels of challenge and strategy to the whole game. So to everyone also who listened this week, thank you for hanging out with us, and we'll see you back here again next week, same time, 1 p.m. EST in Discord.